Namaskar and welcome. You're joining us for the UPSC News Analysis for the 10th of May, 2025. In this deep dive, we'll be breaking down the key current affairs you need to know. We'll look at the basic concepts and really focus on what's relevant for mains. Today we're covering quite a bit freedom of the press, some interesting agricultural stuff in UP, security preparedness, X-account blocking, Operation Sindor, the world order. Lots to get through, so let's jump right in and unpack it all, always keeping that Indian perspective front and center.
Absolutely. It's a packed agenda today, and each topic really touches upon different aspects relevant for the exam governance, security, international relations, socioeconomic issues. Our goal, as always, is to give you that clarity and context, help you see how these things fit into the bigger UPSC picture from our national viewpoint.
Great. Let's start with that first one, freedom of the press and, well, where the judiciary fits in. Seems the Supreme Court made a significant ruling on May 10th.
Yes, a very important clarification from the Supreme Court. They've essentially stated quite clearly that directing media outlets to delete content they've published isn't part of a court's constitutional job. This specific ruling actually overturned an earlier Delhi High Court order. That one involves some allegedly defamatory material from ANI about the Wikimedia Foundation.
Ah, okay. So courts can't just order news articles taken down if they maybe find them objectionable.
That's the gist of it. The Supreme Court really emphasized the importance of press freedom. We see that implied under Article 19(1)(a), freedom of speech and expression. Now, Article 19(2) does allow for reasonable restrictions, defamation being one, but the power to actually block access to content, the SC clarified, mainly lies with the government. Think Section 69A of the IT Act.
Right, Section 69A, I remember that. And we also have the Press Council of India, the new intermediary guidelines.
Yeah.
How do they play into this?
Well, the Press Council is more advisory, really. It can censure or express disapproval, but it doesn't have sort of direct teeth for enforcement. The intermediary guidelines from 2021, though, they set up a structure for grievance redressal, specifically for digital media. What's interesting is this ruling seems to fit a recent trend towards protecting digital expression more strongly.
So thinking about mains, what are the key takeaways here? What should aspirants be focusing on?
The core issue is that balance, isn't it? Freedom of expression on one side, reputation and privacy on the other. You need to consider the potential for judicial overreach if courts step beyond their defined constitutional role. And, of course, the risk that takedown powers could be misused. This ruling, you could argue, bolsters journalistic independence, maybe public trust, but it might also mean more defamation suits going through the regular civil or criminal courts. Ensuring accountability without stifling freedom, upholding separation of powers, these are all crucial governance themes for you.
Looking ahead then, what's the best way forward? How do we navigate this?
I think strengthening self-regulation within the media itself is key, maybe through stronger ombudsmen. More legislative clarity could help too, perhaps amending the IT Act. And promoting media literacy is always important. Plus, encouraging judicial discipline courts sticking to their mandate, not issuing broad censorship orders without clear legal backing. For prelims, definitely keep Article 19(1)(a) and 2, Section 69A, the Press Council, and the 2021 intermediary rules in mind.
Okay, let's shift gears. Agricultural innovation and AI transformation in Uttar Pradesh. This sounds quite positive. What's happening in UP?
Yes, definitely an encouraging development. UP is putting a big focus on agriculture, especially in Bundelkhand and Purvanchal. On May 10th, the CM met with World Bank President Ajay Banga. They launched two big programs, UP Agrees and AI Pragya. UP Agrees is aimed at boosting agriculture in 28 districts in those regions. And AI Pragya has a massive target, training 10 lakh youth in AI skills.
10 lakh, that's ambitious. What's the bigger picture? Why these initiatives? Why now?
Well, Bundelkhand and Purvanchal, they face real challenges. Infrastructure gaps, climate stress, lower farm productivity, and despite a large youth population, digital literacy isn't always high, leading to some outmigration. These programs tied directly into UP's goal of becoming a $1 trillion economy. The World Bank's partnership is obviously crucial here, bringing in funds and expertise.
How do these fit with existing national or state efforts? Are they integrated?
They seem well aligned. You can see connections to Digital India, potentially PMKVY for the AI skills training. UP Agrees fits with the National E-Governance Plan for Agriculture. And it builds on past efforts, too, like the Bundelkhand package. It's also a good example of cooperative federalism, the state working with a global body.
Okay, for the mains exam, what are the critical points to analyze here?
Well, you need to look at whether these initiatives can genuinely tackle those deep-rooted problems in Bundelkhand and in Purvanchal. Can they really boost productivity sustainably? The AI skills aspect, what's the potential for youth empowerment, for maybe reversing migration? And then there's the role of these partnerships, public-private global institutions. How effective are they? Ensuring everyone gets fair access both to the AI training and the farm tech, that's a key challenge to watch.
And practically speaking, what needs to happen on the ground for these to succeed?
Success really depends on building capacity. For UP Agrees, that means strengthening farmer groups, FPOs, the KVKs. AI Pragya needs clear links to jobs, maybe startup support, and monitoring is vital data, dashboards, audits. They should also look at expanding partnerships with agri-tech firms, AI companies, and fundamentally bridging that digital divide, rural connectivity. Education is essential. For prelims, remember UP Agrees, 28 districts, Bundelkhand Provincial, AI Pragya, 10 lakh youth, Ajay Bunga, WB president, and the $1 trillion economy goal context.
All right, let's turn to Maharashtra now. District war rooms and blackout preparedness. Sounds like they're stepping up security measures.
Yes, Maharashtra is definitely being proactive. On May 10th, following a heightened security alert, the CM and Deputy CM held a review meeting. Key outcomes include canceling leave for senior officials and, significantly, ordering the setup of war rooms in every single district.
War rooms in every district, that's quite a step. What exactly is the thinking there?
Well, a war room acts as a central command center, right? It's crucial for quick decisions, coordinating responses during any emergency. The directives also cover mock drills, cyber audits, coastal security reviews, especially focusing on the Mumbai metropolitan region, the MMR. They're also allocating contingency funds to collectors for immediate action, focusing on communication systems to fight fake news, and even mentioning using fishing trawlers for surveillance. Quite comprehensive.
So it seems less about one specific threat and more about just boosting overall readiness.
Exactly. It fits within national frameworks like the Disaster Management Act 2005 and initiatives like Cyber Suraksha Bharat, the Coastal Security Scheme. They're likely reinforcing SOPs for drills, and the focus on real-time public info aligns with Digital India's goals too.
What should we consider for mains regarding this enhanced preparedness in Maharashtra?
It highlights the vulnerability of big urban areas like Mumbai, doesn't it? And the absolute need for smooth coordination between civil and defense agencies. Cyber threats to critical infrastructure are a major angle, too. While enhancing state resilience is the goal, you also have to think about potential disruption during drills and that tricky balance between transparency and secrecy. And of course, how to curb misinformation without restricting genuine freedom of information.
How can Maharashtra build on this going forward?
Clear SOPs for these district war rooms are essential for coordination. Continuous cyber resilience, work audits, training. Public education is key, making sure people know what to do in drills. Leveraging tech, maybe AI for surveillance or communication could help. And importantly, using powers like initiating blackout drills judiciously, minimizing impact on essential services. For prelims, know the definitions: war room, blackout preparedness, cyber audit. Also the Disaster Management Act 2005 and the MMR context.
Okay, next up, a potentially thorny issue. India blocking X accounts and news portals. This brings up that classic tension between free speech and national security. What happened?
Yes, this is significant. The government directed the withholding of over 8,000 accounts on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. This happened around May 9th, 10th. Reports suggest many were Pakistan-based, but several Indian accounts were hit too. Maktub News, journalist Anuradha Bhasin, Arpit Sharma, BBC Urdu, even parts of The Wire. Interestingly, X's own global government affairs account was briefly withheld after they posted about disagreeing with the orders.
And the government's reasoning points towards disinformation around something called Operation Sindoor. What do we know about that?
Details on Operation Sindoor are scarce publicly, which usually suggests a sensitive security operation. The government hasn't made a formal statement on the blocking itself, but the implication is clear. These accounts were seen as spreading harmful misinformation related to this operation, potentially impacting national security or public order.
And the reaction. How has this been received?
Well, X stated they disagree, but essentially have to comply under Indian law, specifically Section 69A of the IT Act. They feel they can't effectively challenge it legally. Press bodies, predictably, have condemned it strongly, calling it an attack on press freedom. It really throws that difficult balance, national security versus free expression, into sharp relief.
So for mains, what are the crucial points to dissect here?
It's that fundamental balancing act. But also, the lack of transparency around these takedown orders is a big concern. What's the exact justification? What's the process? The limited legal options for platforms and users is another issue. Actions like this risk eroding public trust, could lead to self-censorship by media and individuals. It also impacts India's international image regarding democratic freedoms. And there are questions about due process, natural justice, and the space for dissent.
Is there a better way to handle these situations? A way forward?
Transparency is key. Clear procedures for orders, maybe disclosing them publicly after a certain period, independent oversight, perhaps a judicial tribunal to review these blocks. Platforms could have clearer processes for notifying users, handling appeals, and maybe a broader public discussion on finding that balance. Fostering media ethics through responsibility, not coercion, is also important. For prelims focus, Section 69A IT Act, know the affected portals like Maktub News, BBC Urdu, The Wire. Understand the X context, press freedom bodies, and the Operation Sindoor connection.
Following on from that, our next topic is Operation Sindoor. Center reviews security, activates civil defense emergency powers. Seems directly related. What's the update?
Yes, it seems directly linked. The government is clearly taking the security situation very seriously, especially given reports of aerial attacks from Pakistan impacting J&K, Punjab, and Rajasthan in the wake of Operation Sindoor. On May 10th, Home Minister Amit Shah held a high-level meeting with the BSF and CISF chiefs. Crucially, the Directorate of Civil Defense urged states and UTs to invoke Section 11 of the Civil Defense Rules, 1968.
Section 11. What does invoking that actually do? What's the significance?
Section 11 is about emergency procurement powers. Invoking it basically allows state civil defense directors to immediately use allocated funds for protective measures, protecting people, property, maintaining vital services during hostile attacks or threats. It cuts through potential red tape in accessing funds quickly during a crisis. Doing this now shows the government sees a real need for heightened civil defense readiness related to the post-Operation Sindoor threat landscape.
So this goes beyond just military readiness. It's about preparing the civilian side, too.
Absolutely. The BSF handles borders, CISF secures critical installations, but the Civil Defense Act, 1968, covers the civilian response framework. The Home Ministry oversees it all. Activating Section 11 addresses that potential bottleneck, getting funds where they're needed, fast. It highlights the need for that center-state coordination in emergencies.
What are the key considerations for mains arising from this activation?
Well, it points to the problem of fund access delays if Section 11 isn't used. There's also the challenge of integrating civilian volunteers effectively in real emergencies. Managing potential public panic or misinformation is another aspect. On the plus side, it allows faster procurement, boosts resilience of essential services. But transparency in how these emergency funds are used is vital for public trust. Federal cooperation is obviously critical here.
How can civil defense capabilities be strengthened further?
States need to actually invoke Section 11 promptly. Community drills and awareness need strengthening blackout procedures, evacuation plans. Local civil defense infrastructure needs auditing, maybe modernizing, especially near borders. Using digital tools to track fund usage could help transparency. And active public communication is essential to counter fake news. Prelims focus. Roles of BSF, CISF, Civil Defense Act and Rules 1968, especially Section 11's importance, and the Operation Sindoor context.
Okay, let's shift our view to the global stage now. The disintegration of the world order and India's emerging role. That sounds like a weighty discussion.
Indeed. There was a panel discussion at the Huddle on May 10th featuring people like T.S. Tirumurti and Srinath Raghavan. They were talking about the breakdown or maybe erosion of the post-World War II international order, or the alliances, institutions, norms we've known.
And their take is that this isn't just a recent thing, maybe not just about Trump or Meiji.
Exactly. Ambassador Tirumurti argued the collapse has been happening internally for a while. He pointed to things like China joining the WTO back in 2001, Russia's relative decline suggesting deeper shifts, not just one letters policy. Professor Raghavan added that the U.S. seems to be perhaps stepping back from its role as the main underwriter of that order. They also noted the struggles of climate agreements, the weakening of international law highlighted by conflicts like Ukraine and Gaza.
Against this backdrop of, well, uncertainty, what do they say about India's potential role?
The feeling is India has an opportunity, potentially, to be a leading voice for the global South. But this requires continued economic reforms, capitalizing on things like manufacturing shifts. The Apple example in India was mentioned. However, they also suggested Asia's future might depend more on bilateral deals, negotiations between major powers, rather than solely on the old multilateral structures.
How do India's current policies fit into this picture? Things like Act East, the U.S. partnership?
Well, they seem to align. Act East, the deepening U.S. strategic ties like Kuwaiti, defense pacts, and domestic policies like the PLI scheme, these all look like efforts to navigate this changing world. India's leadership in climate diplomacy, like the ISA, also positions it as a key player on global issues.
So for Maines, what are the crucial aspects to analyze from this discussion?
You need to think about how this breakdown of multilateralism affects India's global influence. U.S. policy uncertainty creates challenges, but maybe opportunities too. How does India balance economic needs, especially its export dependence, with becoming more assertive geopolitically? It's a real test for India's strategic autonomy. But there are chances for leadership regionally in the global south. Attracting investment is key. It demands balanced diplomacy, strong domestic economic foundations, and continuing to advocate for rules-based multilateralism.
What's the strategic path forward for India in this shifting global landscape?
Continued focus on economic reforms is fundamental. Strengthening key bilateral ties strategically without getting locked into rigid blocks seems wise. Promoting multilateralism where possible, G20, SKO, BRICS, Global South platforms. Capitalizing on those manufacturing shifts. And leading on climate change with an equitable approach. For prelims, remember the panelists, Tiramurti, Raghavan, China's WTO entry year, 2001, the context of tariff wars, and what Global South generally refers to.
All right, back to public health now. Nipah virus, the need for regular surveillance, and, interestingly, genomic transparency. What's the situation?
Yes, a concerning development in Kerala. A Nipah case was confirmed in Malappuram district on May 8th. That's the third case there in just 2 years. Kerala, as you know, has unfortunately dealt with Nipah before 2 outbreaks with human-to-human spread in 2018 and 2023, and 4 other isolated spillover events where it likely came from bats but didn't spread further between people.
And this latest case looks like another spillover.
It seems so. The patient had symptoms of acute encephalitis syndrome, AES, but thankfully their contacts tested negative, which points towards a spillover rather than an outbreak, at least for now. But, significantly, ICMR-NIV in Pune found variations in the 2018 Kerala virus compared to the typical Bangladesh strain. This really underscores that the virus can change, it can mutate.
The sources mentioned an editorial calling for something specific regarding this genetic information.
Yes, a strong call for making the genomic sequences of the virus public, sharing them promptly in global databases. The argument is that this transparency allows scientists everywhere to track how the virus is evolving, understand its potential risks better, and speed up the development of diagnostics or treatments.
What are the existing government efforts here, and where are the gaps, according to the sources?
We have national systems like the IDSP for surveillance and key institutes like ICMR and NIV. Kerala has its own protocols for testing, isolation, and even bat surveillance when there's an alert. The National One Health Mission, launched in 2023, is also relevant for zoonotic diseases like Nipah. However, the editorial suggests that the sharing of that crucial genomic data isn't happening consistently or perhaps quickly enough. And maybe VAT surveillance isn't as systematic or widespread as it needs to be in high-risk zones. These seem to be the key perceived gaps.
For Maines, what are the important points regarding Nipah surveillance and this genomic transparency issue?
It raises questions about how delays or inconsistency in data sharing might hinder global scientific collaboration and our ability to track viral evolution. Insufficient bat surveillance increases the risk of missing spillover events or future outbreaks, possibly with more dangerous strains, maybe ones causing ARDS instead of just AES. This has major public health implications, nationally and internationally. It also points to a potential fragility in our preparedness despite past experience. And there's an ethical dimension too, transparency versus data control, ensuring equitable access to information for research globally.
So what needs to be done to strengthen preparedness against Nipah and similar threats?
The way forward seems to involve mandating real-time sharing of genomic data on platforms like GSAID or GenBank, enhancing local bat monitoring efforts. Training more labs and researchers in genomics is vital, linking animal and human health data more effectively through the One Health approach, and public engagement to reduce bat-human contact risks in affected areas. For prelims, no Nipah basics, zoonotic bats, AES versus ARDS difference, ICMR-NIV's role, purpose of GSAID BinBank, and the One Health mission.
Okay, almost there. Our second to last topic, cybersecurity preparedness of Indian banks, especially with rising border tensions, a critical area.
Absolutely critical. The finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, held a meeting on May 10th specifically on this. She met with heads of banks, insurance firms, RBI, CERT-In, NPCI. The context of heightened border tensions was explicitly mentioned, suggesting a real concern about potential state-sponsored or other cyber attacks targeting India's financial backbone.
What were the main directives coming out of that meeting? What are banks being told to do?
Given the risks, the focus is heavily on coordination banks working closely with RBI and CERT-IN for rapid response. Banks need to designate senior officials specifically for reporting incidents and ensuring business continuity. Real-time reporting of threats to CERT-IN and the Department of Financial Services, DFS, is now mandatory. Keeping essential services running ATMs, UPI, net banking, especially new borders, is a top priority. They were also told to check their anti-DDoS systems and run regular cyber drills. Insurance companies are also expected to step up, helping with claims and supporting smaller rural banks.
So it's a real whole-of-ecosystem approach to shore up digital defenses.
Yes, definitely. It builds on existing frameworks, the IT Act, certain 6-hour breach reporting rule, Cyber Surakshit Bharat initiative, RBI's digital payment security controls, and the FSDC's role in looking at systemic risks like cyber threats.
For Mainz, what are the key issues to consider regarding bank cybersecurity in this geopolitical climate?
The big one is the rising threat of sophisticated cyber attacks, possibly state-linked, targeting critical infrastructure, especially during tensions. Ensuring that coordination actually works in practice, public sector, private sector, regulators, is vital. Cybersecurity in rural branches is often a weak link that needs attention. It's about national financial resilience, ensuring services continue, maintaining public trust in digital banking. And again, that balanced data protection, transparency about breaches, but managing potential panic.
What practical steps should banks prioritize to strengthen their defenses?
Continuous updating and auditing of cybersecurity systems is non-negotiable. Training staff, especially at the branch level, to spot and respond to threats is crucial. Better collaboration on threat intelligence, including globally, regular, realistic cyber war game drills, and public awareness campaigns educating customers on safe digital practices, especially during incidents. For prelims, understand DDoS attacks, the roles of certain NCIPC, NPCI, RBI, and DFS in the financial cybersecurity landscape.
And finally, let's touch upon the ongoing drone strikes in Port Sudan, a very concerning situation in an already troubled region.
Yes, deeply concerning. Port Sudan has faced drone strikes for 6 days straight, up to May 10th. Key targets have included the international airport, fuel depots, and significantly the power station, which caused a citywide blackout. The Sudanese army is blaming the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF.
Port Sudan became quite important after the conflict erupted in Khartoum, didn't it?
Extremely important. Since the civil war started in April 2023, Port Sudan became the de facto administrative hub, hosting embassies, aid agencies. These strikes mark a dangerous escalation, spreading the conflict and instability further, worsening an already dire humanitarian situation with massive displacement.
Are there any international efforts to de-escalate this?
Unfortunately, the ongoing civil war and the lack of a unified government make effective intervention very difficult. The UN, African Union, IGAD have tried brokering talks, but with limited success so far. Humanitarian aid access remains a major challenge for agencies trying to help.
What are the broader implications of these drone attacks on Port Sudan?
It raises serious concerns about urban drone warfare, the risk of the conflict spilling over regionally, especially affecting Red Sea trade. It's crippling Sudan's remaining infrastructure, deepening the economic and humanitarian crisis. There are concerns about potential war crimes, targeting civilian infrastructure, and the risk of a power vacuum attracting extremist groups. The international response seems inadequate to the scale of the crisis.
What could be a possible way forward here, however difficult?
An urgent push for a ceasefire through negotiations led by the AUN is paramount. Maybe an international peacekeeping presence to protect critical infrastructure. Strengthening neutral diplomatic mediation efforts is needed. Humanitarian aid needs to be scaled up significantly. Power, water, fuel are critical, and perhaps exploring drone defense technologies might become necessary to protect civilians. For prelims, remember Port Sudan's strategic role, RSF versus Army conflict, what drone warfare entails, the blackouts cause, and the Red Sea's strategic importance.
That wraps up our deep dive into the key news analysis for May 10th, 2025, tailored for you, the UPSC aspirant. We've covered a lot of ground today.
Indeed. From press freedom fundamentals to AI and agriculture, security measures, global shifts, health scares, and regional conflicts, always aiming to connect the dots for your basic concepts and Maine's relevance, keeping that Indian perspective.
Remember to subscribe for these daily updates. We really value your thoughts, so please leave a comment and share your perspective. You can also download the audio or the transcript for your revision later on. Jai Hind.